Now, going over to the political part of the podcast, you have Trump beating DeSantis by 37 points, which is also known as astronomical. To have that much of a lead in any political poll, that's ridiculously good. Although you could also say it's not that big because Ron DeSantis has been shooting himself in the foot multiple times, which certainly helps Trump because obviously making yourself look bad is not going to be good for you. So it looks like this is a poll done on Wednesday in which 54% of the likely voters said that they would most likely support Trump. The following candidate they said they're most likely to support for the Republican candidacy was Ron DeSantis at 17%. Then he is followed by former Vice President Mike Pence, then by Tim Scott, and then former UN ambassador to the United Nations, as well as Diet Hillary Clinton, known as Nikki Haley, each coming in at 3%. So the discrepancy between the candidates is quite big in this particular poll. Fascinating that Vivek Ramaswamy wasn't on this poll as well. In terms of other polls I've seen, he's been increasing the amount of support for him. And in terms of campaigning, he's done a lot. I think he's done a lot better job in terms of articulating his ideals and, more importantly, how he will achieve his goals, which very few candidates left and right actually do. They usually just kind of say cliche things like, America's great, or if you're maybe on the right, Republicans are evil, which I probably just summarized 90% of political messaging you've seen in the past 5-10 years, which also shows how perhaps little creativity it takes to make a political ad. But I digress. Back to the point. Now, this specific poll surveyed 1,329 registered user voters across the United States from July 23rd to July 27th. It included an oversample of 818 registered Republicans, and they say that the margin of error is plus or minus 3.67 percentage points for registered voters and plus minus 3.96 percentage points for likely voters in the Republican primary. So in terms of a user base, it's not the largest poll bar any means. That's hardly anyone when you consider the sample size of the United States. They also didn't actually dive into the geographic, which of course geographically people vote differently based on where they live. If you're in Florida, the odds are you're probably getting a lot more votes for Trump and Ron DeSantis, as they both have residency there. But it's interesting to see Trump is beating DeSantis by so much. Even as Ron DeSantis pretends, or he says he has a 2.0 campaign where he laid off about a third of his campaign staff, which I would argue is not enough with how many people are just doing a terrible job on that end. But he's also switching his tactics for doing less political campaigning in terms of end user and meeting prospective voters with the big rallies, and more focusing on the dinner parties where you're spending $2,000 plus for a plate of mediocre fish, or if you're lucky, perhaps a steak. That is a very popular way to raise funds for campaigning, which is an important part because they buy commercials, airtime, and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not too surprised to see that big gap just widen as Trump continues to get more popular and DeSantis continues to struggle. Again, he's had a great run in terms of, politically speaking, being the governor of Florida. Businesses are thriving, people are moving there. A lot of people appreciate him taking on cultural issues such as protecting young students from sexual indoctrination and themes, where he passed a bill that says you can't talk to kids about sex if they're, I believe, from kindergarten to third grade, which, again, for the record, he actually covers all types of sexual orientations. There's nothing in the bill that says gay, as people pejoratively called the bill the Don't Say Gay bill, including the Disney company, as they brilliantly decided to get involved in politics. Now, the bill actually just said if they're under that age, you can't talk about them anything in regard to sex, which is fascinating to see how many just adults are desperate to talk to kids about sex when they're in kindergarten. I don't know what's wrong with those adults. Well, many people can speculate what's wrong with them. There's a lot of things, actually. But that should be, I would think people on the left and the right would all come together and go, why does a first grader need to be told about sexual themes? Is there any legitimate reason for that? Which the answer, presumably, obviously, is no. There is no reason. They don't need to know anything about sex, straight, gay, whatever kind of orientation. That's not in their purview. There is such a thing still as child appropriate, and there's a time and place for everything. That, of course, is not child appropriate topics for that age. But that's just my 3 cents. It used to be 2 cents, but 40-year hyperinflation got to increase that cost. So my thoughts are 3 cents today. It should be 4, but I'm a generous man. I only charge 3. But if you click that subscribe button, greatly appreciate it. Trying to get to 3,000 subscribers by the end of August. Greatly appreciate your support. Now, it'll be interesting to see, does Trump have it in him to keep going with that momentum? He's already got the biggest gain. I think strategically speaking, it's going to be really important who he chooses for his running mate. The Democratic Party, they have a couple of people that are shooting up. You have Robert F. Kennedy. RFK is getting censored partially because he's getting a lot of support from the left and the middle, which politically speaking, that's the focus that most people, politically speaking, need to focus on with a magnifying glass, is people in the middle. The people who feel disenfranchised because one of my favorite pejorative terms or pejorative sayings about politics is people on the left are running off a cliff and people on the right are just walking off the cliff. So it's kind of, you don't have, people always say you don't have much of a choice. Obviously, there's a third-party candidate, which I recommend depending on your political affiliations and your beliefs. But he's garnering a lot of support that could bleed votes away from Biden. And again, depending on how many votes are moving around, that could be a good opportunity for Trump, who many see as very politically charged on the right side of the political aisle. If he had something like Robert F. Kennedy to balance him, that might be a way to get the people who will always vote for Trump. You got the people who love him. He'll get those no matter what. But if he wants to expand in the middle, that might be a good idea. Now, keep in mind a lot of people on the right would not appreciate RFK's former stances being anti-gun. And again, he's still a Democrat. And there's certain ideologies that are kind of de facto when you join that political party, just as there's de facto beliefs usually when you go on the right. Although people on the right, I would say, unfortunately, have a very bad track record for actually doing anything about those beliefs. But nevertheless, that might be an interesting use case to keep increasing that distance between him and the rest. Right now, in terms of the political primary, it seems like Trump's going to win a landslide with those. But as I always say, time shall tell. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to tune in today. I really appreciate you taking time to click that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 3,000 subscribers by the end of August, and we really appreciate it because obviously the more we grow and develop, the better the content will become and the production will become. Also, don't forget to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe and fight the good fight.